The seed of the gospel never changes because neither does God's message or his motive. Grace and peace, everybody. Welcome to Sabbath School Study Group. My name is Chris Bailey, and we are starting a new 5-part series in the book of Mark, but we're looking at the parables. Mark chapter 4 is where we're going to go, and in the parable of the seed and the sower, we begin. We're not going to unpack that whole parable in this particular study. We're just going to focus on the seed itself. But before we even get to the seed, I want to thank you again for watching. Please subscribe to this channel. Also, pass this video on to someone else. And you can even do that by hitting that like button. When you hit the like button, it helps others find the video a whole lot easier. And if you want to see this, like Sabbath School Study Group, but also Sabbath School Youth Group, Change Bible Studies, sermons, recipes, it's all there at changeministry.org. Go check it out. Now let's get to this seed, the seed in the parable of the seed and the sower. Mark is a book that describes Jesus in a way that makes him very personal, makes him very real. And one of the realest things that Jesus did was tell stories. The stories that he told were designed to put it where we can get it, to help him to not just to be understood, but to be accessible, to connect, to engage. So now let's define what the seed is in the parable of the seed and the sower. In Mark chapter 4, verse 13 to 14, he says, Jesus says unto them, know ye not this parable? And how then will ye know all parables? The sower soweth the word. Let's talk about some definitions here. Sowing is not something we think of. When I think of sowing, I'm thinking about needle and thread. But sowing is the idea of a planter planting seeds in order to grow a harvest. So it's something a gardener or a farmer would do. They're the sower. What the sower in this story is doing is sowing the seed of the word of God. That word finds itself, that seed finds itself in different environments, and depending on the environment, that's how or whether or not the seed will grow. But one thing that is the same, that is consistent, regardless of where the seed lands, it's still the same seed. Because what God has to say to us, that never changes. Because what God feels about us, that never changes. Now, how God might say it, that's what we call the method. There are a lot of different methods to get the message across. But regardless the color of the envelope, the letter inside, the content, it's still the same. Based on what we read here in Psalm 119, verse 158, the psalmist says, I beheld the transgressors and was grieved because they kept not thy word. So based on what we understand, the seed is the word. Let's plug that in here to Psalm 119. So we could read that in saying, because they kept not thy seed. Verse 159 says, consider how I love thy precepts, or consider how I love thy seed. Quicken me, O Lord, according to thy loving kindness. Thy word is true from the beginning. God's seed is true from the beginning. And every one of thy righteous judgments, that seed endureth forever. So what the psalmist is trying to get us to see is that the message is the same. What God thinks about us is not a feeling, even though he feels for us. Don't get that wrong, but it's not based on his feeling. It's based on the fact of his character. God is love. And because that is who he is, not just what he does, but because it's who he is, how God thinks about us, in order for that to change, he would have to change. The thought is still the same because he's still thinking that same thought. Maybe we can get some help here from Peter, all the way over here in the New Testament. Does he match up with what the psalmist is saying as far as how the word and God's thought to us being the same? In 1 Peter chapter 1, verse 23, he says, being born again, not of corruptible seed, but of incorruptible, by the word of God. That word which liveth and abideth forever. For all flesh is as grass, and all the glory of man is the flower of grass. The grass withereth, and the flower thereof falleth away. But the word of the Lord endureth forever. There it is, plainly. And this is the word by which the gospel is preached unto you. Let me read that again. And this is the word which by the gospel is preached unto you. So the gospel is another way of saying the word, and that word endures forever. The word is true from the beginning. The very initial thought that God has expressed, because he is perfect and whole, he is infallible, there is no error in him. What he says, it is not a mistake. He can't make a mistake. Whatever God says, because he's the creator, even if what he says is wrong, that will become what will be, because all he says is truth. He can't lie. This is amazing, and this is hope. It lets us know that even if we miss what God has said, he's still saying the same thing. What if we reject what God has said? It's still what he said. What if we are confused? We don't understand what he says. Our misunderstanding still doesn't change his meaning. This is the hope that we have, the stability that we get, and knowing that there is a God that loves us and his thoughts to us are unchangeable. The only thing that needs to change is whether or not we believe them. We'll talk about that in a few studies down the road. But in the meantime, trust that word. Know that word. It's never failed because he can't fail.